It's in the name.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking on self-speak and how to be kind to yourself so that you can be kind to others. We'll get right to that conversation after this important message from Faulkner University. This episode of the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast is presented by Faulkner University. Faulkner University is a private Christian liberal arts university based in Montgomery, Alabama, with a mission to provide an education anchored by not only intellect, but also character and service. The Faulkner experience aims to educate the whole person. Every individual matters every day. We all want to become better versions of ourselves. No one wants to remain trapped where they are because of missed opportunities and unrealized dreams. At Faulkner University, we believe your dreams don't have an expiration date. We understand that you're looking for more than a degree. You want to find your niche and thrive in your career. Whether you're a high school senior just beginning your trek or an adult student looking for a better path, Faulkner is here to help guide your journey. Go to faulkner.edu to apply or get more info. That's faulkner.edu. I'm Travis Creasy. That's All-Pro Counselor with 3 Chord Counseling in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Also, the pulpit minister at Highland Park Church of Christ there in Muscle Shoals. That's Ben Hayes. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Doing really well. Had a good weekend. Had some fun bow fishing this weekend. Will had some fun, I think, at the A-Day game for Alabama, and had a good Sunday. So not too much to complain about. Will, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm sunburnt. First sunburn of the year. Sitting at the ball game, and we had 3 kids under 6 with us. And I came home and I looked at Lindsay and I said, I don't know that she's ready to go to any collegiate football games, this year just yet.
But yeah, what you have to pay for
well, that's true too. We had a good time. Took Dad on Mom's birthday. Mom had knee surgery, and we left her at home by herself on her birthday. Shout out to her while we went to the A-Day game. But
it was a gift. That probably was a tremendous gift.
Probably.
I think she enjoyed just being home with some peace and quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a great weekend. Everything's going really, really well.
Will, I'm honoring you today. I'm wearing my 2023 Panel of Dislike Pick'em Championship jersey. I went back to back. I have a 22 and a 23. You will be getting a 24 soon. Staving off Blake Holloman, I think he got 2 picks wrong in the whole tournament. Just happened to be the 2 that you needed him to be wrong on. But he was on a tear. He really did Alabama. He picked Alabama a lot. So shout out to you, Blake. But hey, any ideas on what jersey you're going with? Still deciding?
I actually, and I think I texted you this. I was telling Lindsay, I was like, "Hey, I won the jersey." I was like, "This is a huge deal." She didn't think it was that big of a deal. But we were driving down the road, and I said, "Basketball is my sport." I said, "Travis is football. Blake is baseball. Ben's probably never going to win one, so it doesn't matter what his jersey is." And I said, "Basketball is mine." And she goes, "Gross. That's not going to look good in a jersey." I was like, "It's a jersey. Like, who cares?" And she said, "Oh, well, I guess you don't care, about what I think the way you look or about how you look, So, I've been throwing around some options. I've been looking at stuff online. So I don't know just yet, but I don't know. Basketball's up there, and basketball is where I want it. So we may have to go that route, which would be new because I think you've gone football, Blake's gone baseball, and I'm not doing a soccer jersey. So
there you go. Well,
it sounds like a pretty good segue into what we're talking about.
Exactly. I was going to say there's no honesty like spousal honesty, and that actually is a healthy relationship that Will just modeled for us. Being honest and then being honest right back. So yeah, just let me know, Will. We'll get that, and then we can wear ours, and Ben can sit over there and wish he had one. So.
Right.
You can't let Josh get one before you, right? That's
yeah. Well, it's going to end up happening. I mean, here's that negative self-talk that's coming in right here. But I'm just going to have to borrow one of yours since you've won 2 of them, right?
There you go. That works. So as we talk about self-speak, and I mentioned in the intro, it is very important. I grew up thinking that if you talk to yourself, you're weird, and it was always kind of a joke, nothing too harsh. But we do. There is an internal conversation that we have with each other, and I think that's one of the one of the ways I think we decipher the Enneagram, I'm sure that plays into it, and really any kind of mental test that you may take is kind of that inner statement. I think generally speaking, women's inner speak or self speak may be more harsh or poignant. Like this specific thing is terrible and awful, and therefore and with us guys, it's just I'm just an idiot, or something like that. Just a general, at least maybe I'm telling on myself. But nonetheless, how we speak to ourselves really does kind of determine the way we speak to others and how we see others. And so maybe we could just share some instances. I know we've talked about from a sports standpoint, the idea that we really don't hear negatives in our mind. If we say don't miss at the free throw line, actually our brain hears miss, 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 miss. They don't hear the negative. And so it's almost better to clear your mind than to have the negative in there. And once again, I'm reminded we just chase rabbits, the Ghostbusters, right? At the end of the Ghostbusters, like, whatever you're thinking about will be the destroyer of the world. And they're all like, quick, clear your mind. And it's this Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And I think it's Dan Aykroyd. It's like, I can't help it. I'm sorry. And so to keep that going, like our self-speak, what we say to ourselves really can hurt or help our perspective on everything.
Yeah, there's just so much that goes into it, and I mean, it's probably a lot deeper topic than even we understand, or concept than we can even completely grasp. But there's a lot of times where we talk about we don't want you saying negative things to other people or listening to what other people say, but then so many times we listen to the internal dialogue in our heads. I know I think we've probably talked about it before, and it's kind of a Lonnie thing that I got from him, but is it true? Can I change it? Does it need to be changed? And then how do I change it kind of deal? Those questions, sometimes I've encouraged clients to ask those questions to themselves. When a thought comes into their mind, you first need to kind of assess whether this is true or not. There's so many times we think things in our minds that, I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart, I'm not pretty, whatever those thoughts are. And when those thoughts come to mind, sometimes they're not even true at all, and weighing what I know versus what I feel. Sometimes I feel a certain thing, and I mean, we were laughing about this earlier, but there are times when I feel, pretty down on myself, but I ultimately know that that's not the truth. And it's just really hard sometimes to convince yourself to listen to the things that but a lot of times in my own mind, I'm feeling cruddy. I'm feeling bad about something. I'm frustrated about something. And that's going to win over the things that I know sometimes. And so we do have to work extra hard in, like you said, just almost clearing our minds, almost just letting it, when we feel that negative thought coming, we recognize that we're having a negative thought and then try to let that negative thought go. Because what you resist persists. The things that you try to push away and go, don't think that, don't think that, don't think that. Well, you're thinking it every time you say, don't think it. So kind of what you were talking about earlier.
I think it's interesting too, because I would definitely say I'm not very good at this. I don't know how many men are great at this of like, it's just, I'm going to encourage myself. One thing I've tried to do a lot as I get older is to surround myself with people that are going to voice what I know about myself. And I don't know that my family was not a very lovey-dovey, affectionate family in audibly saying it. It's still funny today. Like I got off the phone with my dad the other night and I said, "Hey, I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow." And he goes, "All right, bye." And it's just like, that's not the way that my family was. But like here recently, there have been people like Lucas or Andrew or some of us that are a little bit younger that always, before we get off the phone, "Hey, I want you to know that I love you and I appreciate you." And it's been very cool for me to hear that, because I tell myself like, hey, you are valuable to people. Like there is something that you can that you have that can influence others and that God can use for good. But surrounding myself with people that also voice that to me has allowed me to listen to myself more. And I don't know if that makes sense, but like I know I always get down, like if I'm teaching a class or preaching, or now I'm teaching an adult class with Andrew at Highland Park. And I told Andrew, man, I would much rather, teach teenagers. And he was like, you're an idiot. And I said, yeah, but when I walk in the room, I'm the smartest person in the room, hands down.
My experience.
And Andrew said, well, you've legally got to be able to buy alcohol for me to teach it. He's like, I would never want to teach teenagers. He said, I want no part of that. And I told Lindsay, I was like, oh, that was terrible. When class was over, I was like, that didn't flow. It made no sense. And she was like, no, like it really did. And then, of course, my first response is, you're my wife. You have to say that, But then when you do have people come up and just go, hey, I did benefit from something you said tonight, it's just reassuring to go, well, I thought I was capable. And now because you said it, okay, I can listen to myself a little bit more. So I think as we talk about this, and of course, I don't have the life experience or even the degrees, that Ben has in this thought, but I think if we can do a better job of speaking into people's lives, it allows them to believe the things that they want to tell themselves. And I've seen that in my life become so beneficial, whether it's in one of our text groups with Blake and Josh, or just the text group that we have, just knowing, hey, there are people that believe that I have some ability, and that I can use that. So now I can start to believe that even more, because I think one of the hardest things as a Christian is I believe that God forgives me, but it's very difficult for me to forgive myself, because I do expect so much more out of me. And a lot of times it's hard for me to listen to Will saying that, hey, Will's a good person, because Will knows everything that Will's done. And it's hard to forgive ourselves. So I would even try and think, if we could probably do a better job of forgiving ourselves, then we may do a better job of listening to ourselves as well.
Well, so much of what we do as ministers, or should be doing, is convincing the people that we go to church with, and actually anywhere we go, that God and a belief in Him and Christianity is not performance-based, right? We say that, but we're getting paid. There is an aspect of it where we have an employer that we have to meet certain performance levels, but ultimately our salvation is not connected to that. And to me, that is such a big deal. And if we go to the, way up high view, the more secularized our society becomes, I think the more negative we speak to ourselves, right? Our country's founded on the idea that there is a creator, that we are created in His image, and we have value and purpose before we ever perform the first right thing. God has got value. And I always go back to the Lauren Daigle song, You Say, right? When I say I am weak, when I say I can't get things done, there's an aspect of that is true. I am weak, and there are certain things that I cannot do, but God steps in and goes, well, I never expected you to do a lot of those things, and that doesn't change your value. And so if you're listening to this, whatever you do for a living, and trust me, I love meritocracy. I love, as a coach, I'm looking for the person who performs the best. Hopefully I never have to have brain surgery, but if I have brain surgery, it's going to be about, I want the best brain surgeon. I don't care really what their ideology is. Of course, I'd like for them to go to heaven, but if they're purple, got 3 eyeballs, if they're the best brain surgeon, that's who I want. But Christianity is not that. And really, when it comes to God, He has ways in which He wants us to live, but those aren't performances. And in fact, if they're performances, they lose some of the impact and value. It's not real. It's not genuine. So, man, the idea that there's a creator, and the more secular society gets, the more we need to be out there screaming from the top of our lungs, hey, there's a God who says you have value and purpose before you ever do one right thing, much less righteous thing.
Yeah, and I'd say along with that secular idea, the reason that a lot of people including, the people who are in this podcast right now, a lot of times we get a lot of our worth from social media. We post something, we kind of go back to look and see like how many likes I get, how many comments did I get, did people share that?
Ben,
This
preaching right
podcast.
at me. Thanks, man.
I'm coming right at you. But we look at
Exactly. You're right.
even the podcast and go, hey, is it successful? How do we know it's successful? People are listening to it. People are sharing it. People are, saying encouraging words about it. And sometimes those droughts can be long and far in between where people don't say much about it. But when we get that one comment at CYC, or we get a comment at Lads to Leaders or whatever, it's all of a sudden that has been boosted. And, to be on the flip side of what Will was talking about, it's been a long time since I've taught teenagers, Will, and I'm teaching your teenage class now. And so probably some of the same, because I'm looking around the room and going, okay, is it a positive thing that they have all fallen asleep, or is that a negative thing? Where does that fit in with my self-worth and my ability as a teacher? Because, I used to teach teenagers all the time. It's not really been in my wheelhouse as of late. And so it's nice that a couple of them come up and go, that was really interesting. Thank you. We appreciate that. But it's like, sometimes you go, where does my self-worth come in? So you start thinking, okay, I'm not, holding their attention. I'm not being relevant. I'm not whatever. And all that stuff just starts playing in your mind. And you have to be able to stop and go, okay, what do I know? What did I present? What did I do? And, I was just thinking about different ways that people do this. Some people do, self-esteem journals, or they have little prompts that they help themselves with at the end of the day, just to think back, what's something good I did today, and maybe just to think about, Travis, you put me on to some stuff a couple of years ago where somebody just kind of evaluates their day at the end of it. Like, what's something good I did for somebody? What are, some ways that I served today? I don't remember what all of the questions were. What are some accomplishments? I had this positive experience today. I felt proud when I did this particular thing. So any kinds of those prompts, can help people sort of move in a positive direction. Just at the end of the day to go, and I may have had some moments where I felt really down on myself, but what do I know I accomplished today? And there's been days like I've felt that way where I'm like, I didn't get anything done today. And I went and, I spent a bunch of time talking to somebody, or spent a bunch of time, visiting somewhere, and I didn't get anything written down on paper. And then I realized, well, maybe that was the stuff I needed to be doing. Maybe it was those moments where I was in a conversation with somebody who needed me to be in a conversation with them. I may not feel like I accomplished a lot on paper, but maybe it was in those moments that I ministered in some way, or I encouraged in some way. So sometimes we're harder. I know I'm harder on myself sometimes than I probably really should be, because I've probably accomplished and helped more than I realized I did. But we're our own worst critic generally. And it's the way it is in sports. It's the way it is in ministry. It's the way it is in life. That's
an interesting thing. And you triggered in my mind in a good way. This conversation between Jesus and Satan, the temptation, and how he responded with Scripture every time, and he really he turned to God the Father in the Scriptures that really helped him combat Satan. And I'm not calling anyone who's listening to this, or myself, my own self-thought, Satan, but I have had those times where I've been, get behind me, that's not of God, and I submit that to the cross, to the throne of God, that's not of him. And to have those scriptures, and you guys can think, this will be our wrap-up question, but maybe think of a scripture that maybe you go back on, or a song, or a VBS song, or whatever it is that you kind of contemplate, that kind of helps you get through some of those thoughts. Recently, I keep going back to a verse in Matthew chapter 9. I've actually preached on it the last two Sundays, which means my congregation's like, hey, dude, move on. But it's a quote from Hosea 6:6, and I find it kind of interesting because Jesus is telling the Pharisees that they need to go and learn what this means. So, like, if the Pharisees have something to learn, Coach Travis Creasy, has got a lot to learn. But he says, I desire compassion instead of sacrifice. And so those moments, that you can kind of go back through your day and go, I was compassionate right here. Well, then I know I was pleasing to God because he desires compassion. Now, the interesting thing is most compassion is self-sacrifice. It's taking that moment, being in that conversation, and even being in the moment in that conversation. And maybe it's one way, you're just listening and you really didn't have anything to add, but you lended a listening ear to someone who needed you in that moment. And man, there's some people out there that listen to this podcast who are tremendous listeners. Like, I think of Karen Mann, like she picks up on stuff, even when there's not conversation, serious conversation, she picks up on things that she'll say them later or in the moment. I'm like, did they really say that? They did really say that, And so people like that just blow my mind, and they don't know how much they mean just by how closely they listen. And sometimes it's a little intimidating, to be honest.
Yeah.
But a good intimidation.
It's true. Well, I was thinking about, of course, there's a couple of passages that come to mind. I could probably talk about a bunch of them, but we all know all of the people of the Bible were imperfect, except for Jesus. So when we think about people's statements, I can't help but think about Paul, and Paul had a lot of those moments. I mean, he said in Romans chapter 7, things I want to do, I don't do. Things I don't want to do, those are the things I do. So he admits he struggled.
There's a lot of self-speak there.
There really is in Romans 7, but then he's got all kinds of other places where he talks about, really to come down to what he's saying is my failures don't define me. And, he talks about, I fought the good fight, I finished the course, I kept the faith, in 2 Timothy chapter 4. Then in Philippians chapter 4, he talks about what we focus on, whatever things are pure and lovely and good. And then he says, after that, I've learned how to get along with a little and with a lot. I've learned how to, be humbled and how to be exalted, and all those things. He says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So a lot of those verses, like I've fought a good fight, I've finished the course, I've kept the faith, and I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And even in 1 Timothy chapter 1, when he's talking about I was a blasphemer and a persecutor and a violent aggressor, and I acted ignorantly in unbelief, but he talks about how God set him up as an example for all those others who would believe that if I can do it, you can do it. And so Paul may have struggled some with his own self-worth and self-talk at times because of, obviously if you were guilty of sitting there watching a Christian be stoned to death and dragging people, I'm sure that would carry with you for most of your life. And yet he looks back on it and he has to remind himself and remind us, look, I messed up, but God was rich in mercy. I was still a sinner and he died for me, Romans chapter 5. I fought a good fight. I finished the course. I kept the faith. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And so there's a lot of those reminders. And so I love, that the way that Paul does that. And you mentioned a song, and I'll just share the one that I've listened to a lot lately. I just put it on in the truck when I'm kind of feeling frustrated about whatever. And it's The Goodness of God. And it's a devotional song we've been singing and learning here at church a little bit. And there's the line, all my life you have been faithful. All my life you've been so, so good. With every breath that I'm able, I will sing of the goodness of God. And then later he says, your goodness is running after me. So yeah. I may be running away from it some days, but you're running after me. And so that brings a little bit of positive thoughts to my mind.
Yeah, not much you can add to, you theologians. Here. But now I will say this, there's a song that I've listened to a lot. It's by Micah Taylor, and it's called Just Grace. And I'll read you just kind of a short part. It says this, now I see grace, hallelujah, I stand amazed. I'm staring at an empty grave and the stone that you rolled away. When I was a prodigal, you saw a son. When I left the 99, you saw the one. And just like that, all my past has been erased. When I look back, I see grace. Then he goes on, and I love this thought. I still hurt. I fall short on what you say I'm worth. And the devil says I don't deserve. And I think that's for all of us. The devil's going, you're going to fail. You failed. And he plants this seed of doubt. And then I love what Micah Taylor says. So the devil says, I don't deserve what you did on the cross. And he's right, because I don't, but you did it anyway. And what I've tried to tell myself is, when I do feel bad and I have messed up, like Satan's going, hey, you don't deserve God. And God's going, hey, you really don't deserve what I am giving you. That's what this grace is. And that's how valuable you really are to me. And so it almost takes that self-talk that's negative and makes it a positive to go, oh yeah, like I have screwed up, I have messed up, and God still has chosen me. And so I've just loved that thought of, you're having a bad day, you failed, you've struggled. Well, God already knows it, and he already took care of that. So that allows you to now move forward knowing that you are one of God's. And so I just love that thought that he lays out there in that song.
That's cool.
Yeah, you have that idea of, before I ever did the right thing, even while I was yet a sinner, Jesus saw value and purpose in me and stepped down into this world full of stuff that can affect you without you even making the bad choice. Obviously he was crucified. Somebody drove the nails. Somebody did those things to him. And he values put in your name. If you're listening to this, whether you believe in any of this Bible stuff we've been saying, we believe and believe it true that the hope is found in Jesus, that he came for you. Fill in your blank, your name right there, that he stepped into all the chaos of this world. The flu, I don't know if it was around in the first century or not, disease, harm, he saw it, he subjected himself to those things so that we can have a hope and we have a confidence. And I was thinking today about Romans 6, where Paul says, should we continue in sin that grace may abound? He is so confident in Romans 5 and preaches the justification of what Jesus has done so strongly that he then follows it up in chapter 6. But I want you to know there are limitations, right? He's not redeeming sinful behavior, but my confidence is in Jesus. It's not in me. And so there is that balance. I can't do this, but Jesus did. And that is self-speak in of itself, that whatever you're going through, whatever you're dealing, before you even stepped into that situation, Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit saw you and counted you valuable before that circumstance, before you ever did anything good. So guys, I appreciate the comments, sharing, being open. That's kind of what this podcast is about, being open, sharing struggles, and being able to tell people, Will, I'm right there with you. Tonight I'll be laying in bed thinking about all the dumb things I said this morning, and hopefully that, I lean on that verse all the time where God's word never goes out and doesn't accomplish its will, and no pun intended there, Will. But we'll talk at you again soon. Hope everybody has a great week.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.